Now I'm just getting comfy because this is going to be a longer video, but hopefully one that you'll find really useful, because we're going to talk all about choosing a childcare place for your little one. I have done a video on this on Instagram before and it was very popular, but I thought it deserved its rightful place here on YouTube. Now, before we go any further, I have actually got a couple of PDF documents, checklists that you can take with you when you go to look round facilities. So I will leave those linked down below. Make sure that you go and register to download those because they should be really helpful for you. Obviously, I am going to be referring to UK childcare. However, the things to look for when you're going to look round can apply to any country, so it doesn't matter whether you're in the UK or not. Let's talk about the different types of childcare settings that you could choose. So, obviously, you can choose a nursery, and that's maybe the one that comes into our minds most commonly. There are actually a few different types of nurseries, as it were. There's a daycare nursery. So that's a typical nursery where you will drop off your child at 7 a.m. Most are open from 7 a.m. to around 7 p.m. So you really get that wraparound care before, after your work day, and children can nap there. They have sleeping arrangements, normally napping rooms. They have all their meals there, snacks and everything. The other types of nurseries are preschools and school-based nurseries. So preschools are similar to nurseries in that they tend to be standalone facilities, but they take children normally from around the term after their 3rd birthday up until they start school. So they are for older children, and most often they don't run the whole day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. They have shorter opening hours, more like a school day. School nurseries then are very similar, except they are joined to a school building. So it's really worth checking out what's available in your area. The good thing about those latter two, so the school-based nurseries and the preschools, is that they tend to be a lot cheaper than the daycare options. Bear in mind that you can't generally send your child until they're a little bit older, so that's when their free hours are kicking in. But also that they're not open for as long, and often not during the school holidays, which is really something to bear in mind too. If you want a cheaper than daycare option that actually I think is one of the best options and really not very often considered, then you need to look at a childminder. Childminders are fantastic because they look after your child in their own home. So it's a little bit like taking them to nursery, but the nursery is somebody's house. And then they have all the kind of the comforts and benefits of being at home, yet they have that environment with other children, they have that social aspect, and they often go on lots and lots of day trips out. So a lot of childminders will take children to soft play, to the park, to the playground, on little trips out, a lot more than they would get if they were in a regular daycare setting. And we will talk about going out and about in a little bit when I talk about what to look for and questions to ask when you go to look round. Childminders also obviously provide more of a familiar environment for your child. So if you think that your child is one that might suffer with separation anxiety, or they have more specific needs, maybe additional support needs, then choosing a childminder, and obviously one that specialises in that area, would be really useful. You can also, of course, choose a nanny, which is a little bit like a childminder, but they only look after your child and your child alone, unless you do a nanny share, in which case they might look after your child and somebody else's children that you know, so your friend's children, and that way you can split the cost, which works quite well. Nannies tend to come to your house to look after your children there, so it's nice for your children because they're in familiar surroundings. They can also be really, really flexible, but they are more expensive, and you have to be aware that a nanny is treated like an employee. So they either have to be registered as self-employed and do all their tax stuff themselves, or you have to sort that out for them. So it is a little bit more complicated. If you're looking for a childminder or a nanny, then my favourite website is childcare.co.uk. I'll leave it down below. There are lots of ones that are tailored to your specific area, so it's worth looking on Google, but that is a good starting point to see what's out there. Let's talk about nurseries and preschools more then, so when your child is actually going into a setting. The first thing you need to do is have a look on Google or ask around and find out what the local childcare settings are like near you. Now, my favourite thing to do is ask people that you know for recommendations, because nothing is more reassuring than hearing from people whose children already go to the setting. But if you don't know anybody and you're completely new to this, especially if this is your first child, then just having a Google and seeing what's out there can sometimes be the best thing to do. And I have certainly been in that position and done that too. So once you have assessed and seen what different childcare settings are around, you want to ring up and arrange to go and look around for a visit. This is so important, and I can't stress it enough. You really must go and look around, because you will not get a sense of the childcare setting unless you go and see it for yourself. Even if a friend or somebody that you trust has told you that it's great, you might have different preferences than them. And I often say that going to look around childcare settings is a little bit like going to look for a house. You will know when you walk into that place if it's for you and your family and your child or not. You just get a vibe, and your vibe might not be the same as somebody else's vibe. So it's really important to go and look around. And while you're there, they'll give you all the information that you need if you were wanting to sign up. They will also be able to answer all your questions. And I like asking questions in person, because if you ask questions via email, then they have time to kind of collate their answers and think about what they want to say. And maybe if they're not a great childcare setting, they can have time to kind of think about how to phrase things in the correct way. Whereas when you're there, you can see their reactions and get their responses, and also, you know, see the environment straight away. So you've chosen a few settings to go and have a look around. What kind of questions should you be asking when you're there, and what things should you be looking out for? Let's go through these in no particular order, because obviously what is important to you might be different than what's important to somebody else. Probably one of the most important things to ask about is site security. So how do the staff ensure that the children are secure? What are their child protection procedures and policies? Do they have a lock on the gate? Do they have keypad entry? Now, this might seem quite obvious, but actually I've been to a few settings where they did not have this, and they just kind of had like a bolt on the gate that somebody could easily open from the outside. So it's really worth looking into what their security procedures are and their safety procedures are. When children are playing outside, how do they know they're safe? How do they stop strangers from getting into the setting? Most settings will have a password system, so you'll have to be buzzed into the door, and then if you're not the usual person to pick them up, so you know, mum or dad or whoever it is normally, then you'll have to give that person, say grandma's picking them up, you'll have to give them a password so that they can actually pick up your child, and that's to try and stop other people being able to take your child, obviously without you knowing about it. Definitely don't want that to happen. Talking of time inside and outside, ask how much time is spent outside daily. Now, the best settings really should be allowing your child free access to the outdoors pretty much at all times. Now, if your child is a baby, then this isn't so relevant, because obviously they can't just walk out the door. You'll need to ask how much time is taken to take the babies outside, because they definitely should have outside time every day, even if they're small babies. We know how important outside time is for children's development. If they're older and they can walk independently, then most settings, or most good settings, will have doors that are open pretty much all the time, and the children can walk in and out, so they can choose whether to play outside or inside. This is brilliant for so many developmental reasons that we can't get into now, but if you have any questions, then just leave them down below for me. You also want to ask how much time is spent outside the setting on trips. Do they go for walks? Do they go on proper trips? You need to know that this is happening, because really good settings should be taking their children out and about. I had a disagreement with somebody quite a while ago about this, and they argued that the setting was so good that they didn't need to take the child out and about. But actually, it's really important for your child's development and learning that they have that time, especially if they're in a daycare setting where they're there from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 5 days a week. They need to have that time out and about to just experience the world around them. Whether that's walking to the pond to look at the ducks, or to the post box to post a letter, or whether that's bigger trips like going to the farm. They don't always have to be proper as we think of like school trips. They can just be little walks around the block. That's absolutely good enough. It's just how often is that happening? If it's not, then you need to think about whether you're happy for your child to be in a setting where they don't take them outside. Ask what the sleeping arrangements are. So make sure that your child has somewhere safe and secure that they can sleep. Ask to see the room that they'll be sleeping in to make sure that you're comfortable with it. And then ask any questions that are individual to you and your child about how they sleep. For example, can they bring their own sleeping bags with them? Can they have their white noise? And all those kind of questions, they'll be individual to you and your child. If you've got a baby that doesn't like sleeping in a cot, ask the setting how they will manage that practically. There are settings where they will happily have the baby in a sling or a carrier on the adult while they're kind of going about their daily business, and the baby can sleep there. It's definitely available, so make sure you ask about it. When your child goes to a setting, they will have a key person, or I think it's called a key worker now, actually. They keep on changing the term. They'll have a person assigned to them to be their special person, and that person will be responsible largely for your child's day-to-day needs. So they will look after them if they hurt themselves. They will be the one that changes their nappy. They will probably be the one that sits with them at lunchtime, and they'll be the one generally that feeds back to you at the beginning and end of every day. So ask about their system. How many children does that person have assigned to them? How do you know about them? What kind of feedback will they be giving you from day to day? And how will they ensure that your child gets ample time to bond with that person? Because of course that's really important. This is a great big step for us and our children, and we need to make sure that our children have that time to bond with that key worker. When we're talking about feedback at the end of the day, ask in general what the feedback will be. Sometimes you get a notebook sent home to you with written information in about what your child's eaten, how many wet and dirty nappies they've had, what they've done for the day. Sometimes there's a notice board that you can see when you go in and out of the setting. A lot of settings nowadays will have an app where they take photographs of your child throughout the day, and then they'll ping to you on your phone or wherever, and you'll be able to see what they're doing, which is lovely. Ask about the daily routine and also what the menus look like, or what the typical menu is, especially if you have a child that has allergies or restrictions or is just a fussy eater. It will be important for you to know these things. It's also a good idea to have a look at the menus just to make sure that they're feeding children a balanced diet. Most nurseries are really proud of the fact that they do this, and generally they have much nicer menus than school menus. Throughout the day, your child may be doing different things, so ask about the daily routine. Do they have a snack time? Do they have a nap time? How do these work and what does it look like? Again, a setting with a strict routine doesn't mean that they're a good setting. A setting that says we don't really have much of a daily routine, we just follow the children's interests and see where they take us, that's actually probably better, because it's more like being at home, it's more child-led. Your child will feel more comforted and supported by that. Obviously you want some form of routine, so like a lunch time and a snack time and maybe a story time, things that your child can rely on throughout the day. But the rest of that time probably really should be flexible. I'm going to talk about things to actually look for when you go around a setting in a second, but the last thing that you want to ask is about the settling in process. So once you have chosen a nursery and your child is due to start, they will need to settle in to the nursery, so basically get used to it. Most settings will have some form of policy on this, but it varies from place to place. Normally, it's something like your child will go to that setting, to the new nursery, for an hour with you, and you'll go together and you'll play together and you'll look around and you'll spend that time just with each other and obviously with the other people that are there. The next time your child might go and you'll spend half an hour there with them, and then you'll leave for the last half an hour, so then they have a little bit of time alone. Then the next time they go, they'll go for possibly a slightly longer period of time and they'll go without you. And then eventually, obviously, that will mean that they'll transition into just their normal hours and you won't be there anymore. Good nurseries will be flexible on this because children are very different and some have separation anxiety and other issues. So you really need to speak to them about what they will do for your child and what will they do if your child isn't settling in, because that can actually be relatively common. Okay, I've moved you back round. Come on, we're doing this. I know it's a long video, but hopefully it's one that is really helpful for you. Let's talk about things to actually look for then when you're walking around the setting. Probably one of the most important things then is, are the children happy that you see? Do they seem engaged? It's really a good idea to be able to go and look around somewhere while the children are there. Sometimes they show you around out of hours, and that's not really ideal because you want to be able to see the children playing. Do they seem happy? Do they seem engaged? Are there any children just sitting in a corner seeming relatively neglected? Now that sounds awful, but I have seen that children are sitting sobbing in a corner and they're being ignored. So it's really important to see what's going on. And then if you do see something like that, ask about it. Oh, what's wrong with that little boy over there? Is everything okay with him? And see what they say, because there might be a legitimate explanation. You won't know until you ask, but it is really important for the most part to see that children are really happy and they feel safe and secure there, because that is the main thing that we want for our children. Obviously at this age, rather than the learning, it's about the social skills, the safety, the security, and being happy. Are the staff friendly? Do they seem happy? Are they knowledgeable? If you ask them questions or you just kind of observe staff moving around the children, how are they interacting with the children? How are they talking to them? Try and listen in on maybe a conversation and see how they're dealing with things, and try and speak to more than one staff member if you can, just to get a good picture of what the main staff are like. You could be speaking to the very best person there, but the rest of the people might not be as good. So make sure that you get a good picture of generally how the staff are. What vibe do you get when you walk around? Does it feel homely? Does it feel secure? Does it feel like the kind of place that you would want to be? Or does it feel sterile and a bit unclean maybe? Just not quite the vibe that you would want? As I said right at the beginning of this video, you often get a feeling when you walk into a setting, and your child will be the same. A lot of settings now are becoming a lot more homely, so they have low-level lighting, they have soft furnishings. That might seem a little bit ridiculous to some of us that are used to more kind of formal ways of doing things, but actually we know that developmentally this is much better for children's health and well-being, and those things feed directly into their progress and their learning. So we really need to make sure that settings are getting that right. So do they provide all those things? Is it somewhere that you think your child will be happy? And then what kind of resources do they have? So what toys do they have there? How is the room set out? Just because they don't have tons of toys doesn't mean that they're a bad setting, by the way, but just ask about it, because lots of places do more of a child-led way of learning. They might be more Montessori style, which tends to not be so many toys and more open-ended things like wooden blocks and ramps for the children to build their own creations. So just ask about it, and then look around. What's on the walls? Are things down at child level where they should be, or are they up high, displays up high, which is only for the adults? It's not for the children because they can't see up that high. So we really want things to be down all on the children's level. That shows that a setting understands child development, that they understand pedagogy, how children learn, and they want the children to be happy and engaged. If you have more questions, then please just drop them in the comments below, or you can send me a message on Instagram or Facebook if you don't want it to be public. I hope this video was helpful. Well done for reaching the end. I know it was a long one. If you did like it, then I would really appreciate you leaving a like or a comment or sharing the video with your partner or anybody else, because it really does help me and I so appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye everybody.